that's what you're doing when you go out to a protest. I've been there. I saw this go down in 79 and 80. You're risking your life to go out there, and hundreds of thousands of people are. And I'm going to give a pile of leaflets to pass around. A woman who is a political prisoner in Iran is going to be coming next Friday, April 2nd, and speaking at the YWCA. She was 8 years in prison under the Islamic Republic. She marched with women, went to oppose Khomeini's veiling. And anyway, I'll give out these, and you know, I urge people to come. I'm not quite through, but I want to give you this. I want to mention one other thing that I think. You've heard of the Stockholm Syndrome? Well, what about the Tina Syndrome? There is no alternative. I think this weighs incredibly heavily on people. It's no good, but what can we do? Revolutions have failed. Revolutions haven't worked. They've led to horrors. There's no other system that's any good. And the first dimension to this is that a revolution in a country like this is impossible. It's too powerful. But if you look at what's happening in Afghanistan, in Iran, even these tensions with Israel, the greatest financial crisis in the world, even the fighting within the ruling class represented by this Tea Party versus Obama, there are contradictions seething under the surface in this country. Point two, you know, and there's talk of a war on Iran. These days, Netanyahu, there are reports that when Netanyahu came to the United States on this trip, he's looking for bunker buster bombs. The implications of an attack like that are staggering. And we can get into this more. But the second point that I just briefly want to refer to is the question of, you know, the history of socialism. Let's face it, when you talk about alternative, the first thing people think is, well, socialism, communism, they failed, they were horrible, Mao killed however many million, the latest figure is, and so on. And, you know, we at Revolution Newspaper, the Revolutionary Communist Party, feel this discussion has to be broken open. That these revolutions were great things, but we have to critically evaluate them and do much better next time. We cannot be afraid of the truth. We've got to look at all of it, but this is still the solution to get rid of capitalism and bring a world of emancipated humanity and rid the world of all this unnecessary suffering. And this is what Bob Avakian's new synthesis, his re-envisioning of communism is about. So I invite people to open up this discussion, to take a look at some of the literature. I invite people to join with me, Revolution Newspaper, to build a movement for revolution now. Thank you so much.
Russ Baker.
It seems that at every event I speak at, I feel like a disappointment because I'm not sure that I'm with the program. But that's been my whole career, so I'm okay with that. I am a journalist, and in my book, when you're a journalist, you may disagree with this, but to have credibility with as large an audience as possible, you don't carry signs and you don't wear ribbons. It doesn't mean that you don't do your job for trying to get out important information to the public, but that's just the way that I operate. And I hope you can appreciate that.
Can I offer you a ribbon?
I wanted to thank Mickey and the Unitarians and the other folks who've been involved in putting this together. I think it is very important to have these kind of forums. I don't think there are enough of these in the country. There, in fact, are very, very few events where actual people actually congregate in a non-virtual way, so it's always nice to see something like this. I live in New York, but I'm always glad to come out to Berkeley. It's a very lively and informed community, and that's, again, something that's quite rare. The stated topic of this was Obama's post-9/11 wars. What I want to talk about is the subject of something in a handout we have over here on our table, the white table. It's an essay I wrote called "What Obama is Up Against." What I want to emphasize is that this is not saying that Obama, I'm not taking sides, I'm not taking a stance on what sort of a job Obama is doing. What I'm trying to do is to address institutional factors in our country that affects him, that affected George W. Bush. In fact, it affects all presidents of the United States. It's a dynamic that we don't talk about because we don't know about, and not only do uninformed people not know about this, but informed people don't know about this. In fact, I'm even going to say that I didn't know about this until I began the research that led to my book, Family of Secrets. I believe I'm a well-informed person. I've been a journalist for 20-some years. Prior to that, I was involved with politics, and I've always been very active. I always read a lot, and I thought I was well-informed, but what I discovered completely blew my mind. It was a whole different history of this country of which I was unaware. Some people are not entirely unaware of this. One person who's somewhat aware of this is a man named Peter Dale Scott, who is sitting over here in the second row. Peter is one of the very, very few people in this country who has been trying to understand the deeper structural roots of what happens. And not with an agenda, but with a deep and abiding curiosity. And I join him in that mission. What I did was I began to see Barack Obama in a larger sweep of presidencies and the sort of little discussed behind-the-scenes powers that shape those presidencies. Now, it is true that most sort of, I would say, certain analyses by the likes of Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn and so on do focus on these elements, but they focus on them in an academic way or in a structural way, not particularly in a journalistic way. This is something different. This is a matter of actually identifying specific narrative storylines, the actors, the documents, finding all of the evidence, and telling the full story with the footnotes. What I'm talking about is an underlying power dynamic that basically has been missed in the conventional journalistic narrative. It's missed largely in the protest narrative, too. It's mentioned in passing. But there's a kind of a conflict to me in much of the protest narrative, which is Obama's just like all the rest of them, don't let him off the hook. And by the way, that's the way the system is anyway. In a sense, there's a kind of an inherent, can you see the sort of contradictory tension there, which is he's a bad guy, but at the same time, the whole thing is bad. And those are different issues. And by the way, I'm not willing to accept that he's necessarily a bad guy. This involves a number of sectors that I get into in Family of Secrets, and this is what I would call it. Dwight Eisenhower, a military man, and a radical called it the military-industrial complex. I would probably call it the military, finance, industrial, intelligence, oil complex, and maybe we could add a few other words to that as well. Maybe media complex. But we need to keep thinking about this and figuring out what it is. Sorry?
Narcotics.
Narcotics. But in any case, it shapes our presidencies, and it shapes all of our lives, and yet we kind of almost don't even see it. One of my favorite images, I was just over taping at KPFA, and one of the things I said to the host, I said, you know, I love that movie, The Truman Show. How many of you have seen The Truman Show? Okay, this is this movie with Jim Carrey, and he's this character, and he's going through his very lovely life, and at some point something dawns on him, there's something wrong with the whole picture, and eventually he discovers to his horror, sorry to ruin the movie for you, it's still worth seeing, But he discovers that he's in a